Oh, Sam is doing most of the service tonight. Thank you, Sam Klein, for covering for me the last few weeks as I've been sick. Greatly appreciated, and thank you for even doing most of tonight's. Greatly appreciated. You've been a godsend, so thank you. Karen, are we streaming every place? Sam, it's up to you.
I saw the nod there, and thanks for the intro, Rabbi John. It's great to see you looking well and recovering quickly. I know we're all just really thankful that you're here with us. So everyone, Shabbat Shalom. It's great to see our community come together because this week we've truly witnessed some destruction in our country. And I know that Rabbi John will come to address that later in the service. So for now, what I like to focus on is perhaps the opposite. Tikkun Olam, repairing of the world. So in the early part of the millennium, maybe 2nd, 3rd century, that meant that God would be replacing our imperfect world with one of divine rule. And then the Kabbalists in the medieval age applied the term to human action to bring oneness and peace to all. Now, Michael Walzer, in his book, Exodus and Revolution, pays attention to the same thing. He writes that the Israelites are not, after all, magically transported to the promised land. They're not carried on the eagle's wings of Exodus 19. They must march to get there. And the march is full of difficulties, crises, struggles, all realistically presented as if to invite human as well as divine resolution. And the two, therefore, are not contradictory. Now, I think that we can see this in the very first encounter between God and Moses. When God first tells Moses, I will send you to Pharaoh and take the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses responds famously with these words, Mi anochi, who am I? What's interesting is God doesn't actually respond to that question. God says, I will be with you. It's a partnership of the human and the divine. So let us remember that. When we see human action in this world that leads to destruction of what we hold dear, what we hold sacred, our tradition reminds us that righteous human action in divine partnership can bring tikkun olam, repairing of the world. So let's begin our story of the Exodus this week with that partnership. I'm pleased to welcome back our cantorial soloist who led a wonderful service with us last week, Joel. So Joel, please lead us in Let My People Go. If you'd like to follow along in the Siddur, you can find it on page 665.
When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Though pressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land, tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. Then God told Moses what to do. Let my people go to lead the children of Israel through. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land, tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. They journeyed on at God's command, let my people go. They came at length to Canaan land, let my people go. mean old Pharaoh. Let my people go.
Thank you, Joel. It's great to hear that familiar melody again. So we're going to do our first big page turn of the night to our Kabbalat Shabbat service, receiving Shabbat with the words of Shir L'Adonai. Let's sing a new song to God this year. Shir L'Adonai, Shir Chadash, page 131.
I'm just going to sing Lie, Lie, Lie as a Nigun. So if you want to all just sing Lie, Lie, Lie at home, just do that. You can read the words, but I'm not going to sing them tonight. Lie, 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 clap your hands.
That melody always brings me back. Thank you, Joel. So our liturgy says that God's coming. God's coming to rule the earth justly, and better perhaps than any of us can. And so we are going to rejoice with all the earth with the words Yismechu Hashamayim. It's on the same page, 131 at the bottom. Yismechu Hashamayim.
Yismechu Hashamayim. Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, V'tagil ha'aretz. Yismechu Hashamayim, Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim. V'tagil ha'aretz. Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam umelo. Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam umelo. Yismechu Hashamayim. השמיים, ישמחו השמיים, ישמחו השמיים, ותגל הארץ.
Now, we actually have a prayer for our country in the Siddur, and I just want to reference it right now. It starts, O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. Our rabbis taught us that when the northern kingdom of Israel was destroyed by the Assyrians and the kingdom of Judah by the Babylonians and then the Romans, our ancestors brought that on. They no longer merited protection. It's heavy stuff. But yet our tradition uses that experience as an ethical lesson to be learned in our day. And the words of Lachadodi teach us to pick ourselves up from that destruction of past mistakes, lift ourselves up, shake off the dust, wake up, and step into the light and the future and the glory. So let's turn to page 138. We'll do verses 1, 2, 5, and 9 and rise on that last verse.
חדותי לי כקהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. וחדותי לי כקהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד השמיענו, אל המיוחד אדוני אחד הוא שמו אחד לשם ותפארת ולתהילה. לחדותי נקרא קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לחדותי נקרא קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לחדותי נקרא קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי בא אורך, קומי אורי, 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 שיר דברי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לחדותי נקרא קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לחדותי נקרא קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום, עטרת בעלה גם בשמחה, ובצוהלה תוך אמונה עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לחדותי נקרא קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לחדותי נקרא קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
It's time to bring the light of Shabbat in. And I know that I asked Nicole, let me see if I can find her here. Nicole, are you still on? Uh-oh, she might have dropped off. She's a co-host. There she is. Hi, Nicole. So, Nicole, I'm going to spotlight you here, and she's got beautiful candlesticks to lead us and bring the light of Shabbat in tonight. And there's Brett. Hey. So, Nicole, if you'd like to go ahead and if you'd like to say anything about your candlesticks, feel free to unmute and do that. But otherwise, go ahead and light the candles, and we'll join you in the Shabbat blessings led by Cantor Joel.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner v'tzivanu lehadlik ner v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Thank you, Nicole. Beautiful candles. And Brett, thank you. We now rise for the Baruch Hu. It's on page 146 as we begin our Mariv service.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamevorach Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam va'ed hamevorach leolam va'ed.
Please be seated. So, who is Adonai? God gives Moses an introduction twice in this Torah portion. I'll tell you the first shortly, but the second one's more interesting. The second time, God said to Moses, "My name is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh." Ehyeh for short, meaning I will be what I will be, phrased in the future tense. Now, Rashi, the French medieval commentator, has the most incredulous commentary on this. Ehyeh, I will be. That means I, God, will be with the people of Israel in their sorrows, their tsuris, if you will. And Moses responds, Master of the universe, you want me to call you Ehyeh twice? Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, and remind them, the people of Israel, that their tsuris isn't over, that there's more to come. Don't they have enough of it as it is? And God responds, good point. Call me Ehyeh for short. Ultimately, what matters most is that God will be with us, whether we are going through tsuris or not. The name of God, I think, is best defined that line of Adon Olam that we sang last week. V'hu haya, v'hu hoveh, v'hu yihyeh. God was, God is, God will be, the eternal. So let's all please rise together and sing the Shema, page 152.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevod Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vahed.
We continue the words of the V'ahavta. You may be seated.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת הפעם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
So I had the privilege of studying many years at HUC with one of the authors of Torah, a woman's commentary, and her insights into Torah were just sort of mind-blowing to me in many ways. And our parasha this week, it very much appears to be devoted to Moses, but it also highlights 5 women without whom the exodus from Egypt would never have been possible. And their actions give us powerful precedent and give us direction in our time. First and second, Shifra and Pua, the Hebrew midwives, who because they fear God more than any tyrant, defy Pharaoh's order to kill the baby Hebrew boys. Yocheved, Moses' mother, who hid him and places him in the basket of reeds. Miriam, his sister, who watched over him. And finally, Pharaoh's daughter, who showed mercy and adopted Moses and named him. So we have defiance, bravery, care, and mercy. These are the virtues that these women modeled for us. So let's sing a song devoted to one of them, Miriam's song. You'll find it on page 646. I'm going to try to find the words to copy into the chat for everyone. But if you find it at the back of your book, 646, you'll follow along with Cantor Joel.
And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one who we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. And Miriam was a weaver of unique variety. The tapestry she wove was one which sang her history. With every thread and every strand she crafted her delight. A woman touched with spirit, she danced toward the light. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. When Miriam stood upon the shores and gazed across the sea, the wonder of this miracle she soon came to believe. Whoever thought the sea would part with an outstretched hand, and we would pass to freedom, march to the promised land. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced the whole night long. And Miriam the prophet took her timbrel in her hand, and all the women followed her just as she had planned. And Miriam raised her voice in song, she sang with praise and might. We've just lived through a miracle, we're gonna dance all night. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced the whole night long. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long.
So many nostalgic memories tonight. Thank you, Sam Wildman, for pointing out that in the chat there that Miriam's song was written by Debbie Freeman, and today is for your side. I saw some dedications going around on Facebook, so that's great. Thanks for pointing that out. Wonderful leader of music for the Reform movement and the entire Jewish world. So looking into, we're heading into Vishamra now, and there's a Hasidic homily on one verse in our parasha where just talk about how Miriam watched over Moses, but she intentionally placed herself at a distance away from Moses so that she could perhaps know what would happen to him. And this Hasidic commentary, Levi Yitzhak, says that when we distance ourselves from our material worlds, then we are able to grasp true connection to the Creator. So we know that Judaism never advocates for a purely monastic lifestyle, but our institutions like Shabbat invite us to distance ourselves from the material world. And that means current events as well, to reconnect with God and ourselves. So as tempting as it may be this Shabbat, we can still take a step back in order to recharge so that we can take a step forward in the week to come. This concept of Shabbat is ours, it is precious, and we will guard it. So page 162, Vishamra.
Vishamru b'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני, עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת בי נפש, שבת בי נפש, שבת בי נפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
Let's take a moment to think about all those who are in need of healing of any kind. Please, if you know of anyone that you'd like to share with the community, please add their name to the chat. If you're in social media, add their name to the comments. And I will share the names of those that I'm aware of in our community who are in need of healing. Pamela Abraham, Luis Adhami, Hillel Baldwin, Wes Basowitz, Enid Basowitz, Bert Brooks, Nancy Braun, Bella Kane, Mary McYaffee, Mike Cohen, Myron and Ruth Crystal, Chaim Deckel, Annette Diamond, Marissa Dupuy, Sadie Finale, James Glicka Hernandez, Lila Hanish, Lisa Hanish, and Rabbi John Hanish, Neil Hecht, Mindy Hecht, Becky Holm, Herb Jaffe, Denisa Kleiner, Posey Kramer, Susan Landau, Stan Lieber, Georgia Levenberg, Joe Luttrell, Ruben Manavi, Jeff McCoy, Arlene Nyberg, Chris Nelson, Katya Nepome, Joe Norton, Marlene Rapport, Milt Schuffman, Jerry Shapiro, Margarita Silva, Phyllis Stolaroff, Helen Sullivan, Isabella Tabrizi Siavash, Frank Torres family, Larry Turner, Andrea Domi Vargas, Manuel Vargas, Riley Vargas, Michael Warner, Renee Weiss, Ed Wire, Morton Yevzarov, Jack Zastro. And I'd like to share the names of those you've written in the chat now. Maxine Stern, the Scott family, Risa Davids, the injured Capitol police officers, Francis Linsk, Jody Migdal, Paul Hiddleman, Greg Kerner, Carolyn Crystal, Dave Oren, Bethany Love, Helene Levy, Art Geller, Joe Ann Shapiro, Debbie DeVrea, America, our country. And thank you for that, Jerry. I'd also like to add everyone who's battling this virus, COVID-19, and all those who are caring for those who are ill at this time. And thank you, Rabbi John, for mentioning those who are injured in this week's events. If you would join me now in this prayer of Misha Berach on page 371. We wish all these individuals a refuah shlema, a complete and full, and I'd like to add a quick healing, Mahira.
Sheberach avotenu mekor habracha limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Sheberach imotenu Habracha Avoteinu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Amen, amen. So the first time that God makes an introduction to Moses, it takes this form. I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. This shall be my name forever. This my title from generation to generation. So I encourage you now to find some peace and spiritual grounding in the words of our Amidah tonight. We'll begin on page 164. So please rise with me. And after Joel's finished leading us in prayer, we'll have a moment for silent meditation. You can use the words all the way to page 180 and then find your seat. So again, page 164. Please rise with me if you are able.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיה כל אתה רב להושיע משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם מכלכל חיים בחסד מחיה הכל ברחמים רבים צומח נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו ישנה עפר מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומיתו מלך מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום יעללוך סלה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Shalom Rab al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rab al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rab al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rab al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov b'necha levarech et Amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם.
Moses. During this week's Torah portion, we see Moses go from being just a young child to being a man of 80. And by the time you're 80, you have your routines. I'm only 59. I already have a bunch. Now, I always imagine Moses at this age. He'd wake up before dawn. He'd eat a slice of pita with a lot of hummus on top. He'd grab his staff and he'd head out with his sheep for their daily walk. And each day he would take that same path, that same route. His sheep could practically do it without him. His memory of killing a taskmaster, well, it was nearly forgotten. And sometimes it felt like an old dream. His need to change the world, to be outraged at injustice, had disappeared. He just was. And that's not all bad. It's nice being present at the moment. I preach that all the time. Be present. Enjoy the moment. And he was pretty much an expert in that. So he went through the actions that he needed to go through and lived the familiar patterns that gave him pleasure. If only the cries of the Israelites hadn't reached God's ears. Maybe, just maybe, he could have lived out his last years bouncing grandchildren on his knee and enjoying his daily walk with his flocks. But the cries of the Israelites, they were heard by God. So God went through, God's Rolodex, his holy contact list, looking for a leader who never knew the bonds and boundaries, of slavery. And God could only come up with one name. Moses. There was no one else. So God sent a burning bush to talk to him. But Moses liked his life. Others might be suffering, but he wasn't. He was in that upper tax bracket. He was doing just fine. So he ignored that bush. For how many years did that bush burn? For how many years did Moses avoid God's call? Because he had enough sheep. He had enough love. He even had a nice Midianite townhouse with 2 camels in the garage. What did it take for Moses to finally say, yep, I have to deal with reality? As I think about that burning bush, I think those flames represent the brutality of slavery, and the bush represented the Israelites. God could only keep those flames from destroying that bush for so long. At some point, it would be consumed. At some point, the cruelty of slavery would destroy the Israelites. Because flames of destruction, of hate, of brutality, they can't be controlled forever if we don't try to put them out. So bush caught Moses' eye, and he approached it, and he saw that the bush was burning but wasn't yet consumed. But for how much longer would that remain true? And the bush spoke to him and said, you gotta do something. Do something now. I need your help. Go save the Israelites before the fire consumes them. And he could have ignored the voice of God, ignored the directive, ignored his enslaved brethren. He could have left them to be engulfed by the flames of slavery and brutality. He could have left the bush thinking that he would act, and then later, after dinner and a good aperitif, he could have decided it was just going to be too much work. But he didn't. He listened. He acted. For 40 years, he had done nothing, but he saw that he could no longer live for just himself. On Wednesday, we all became Moses. We saw the bush. We saw it was burning, but not yet consumed. And our hearts went out to our representatives and those who protect them. We can no longer ignore the flames that were attempting to destroy all that we believe in as Americans. Yes, on Wednesday, every American woke up. They finally had to see that the flames had been dancing around them, around us for 4 years. We had to notice that, well, those flames were about to burn something down. As a nation, we've been ignoring it as the bush. We've been ignoring the bush as it burns. Anguished cries like the cries of the Israelites have been rising into the heavens. Cries have come from, well, families sitting on our borders expecting us to do as our law commands, to open our doors. Laws have been ignored by our country's highest office holder. Cries have come from families entering our immigration system only to have their children taken from them. Cries have come from our youth watching our environment being destroyed by every action of a government that cares only for itself. Cries have come from minorities being killed and abused due to systemic racism. Cries have come from those fiscally drowning due to an ever-growing separation between the haves and the have-nots. And of course, cries have come from those who need assistance because of COVID-19. Some days we have acted, but on others we have remained on the sidelines. We've used the pick and choose method. So often that would be enough because we just don't have time for every social justice issue. And lately, there have been so many to choose from. But we've been playing whack-a-mole without being willing to admit that all those moles had one parent. On Wednesday, the bush was burning and we could no longer ignore it. If we did, the flames would finally consume all that matters. We could no longer ignore the cruelty of our Pharaoh and his minions. Thankfully, our government found a way to survive and to overwhelm the forces that were against it. But also, thankfully, our government found a way to survive and to overwhelm the forces that were against it. But sadly, one police officer, Brian Sicknick, died. May his memory be for a blessing. And somehow, with only one death of those defending our democracy, it almost seems like a victory, but it isn't. Because one life lost attempting to protect our democracy is too much. Our executive branch allowed an attack, spurred on an attack on another branch of government, on the legislative branch. Think about that. One branch supporting an attack on another. Our police were overwhelmed by insurgents who only had allegiance to a tyrant, not to our government and our government structures and policies. These insurrectionists thought they could stop the political process, but they could not. Shortly after midnight, as a new day began on Thursday, Our electoral college system was completed. The process was completed by representatives who hours earlier had feared for their lives. All I can say is may every insurrectionist be caught. May they all be arrested. May they all be considered accessories to murder due to the death of Officer Sicknick. May they all spend time in prison. Because to me, nothing short of that seems right. But this outcome has been the only outcome possible since the day Donald Trump won office. So let me offer an apology, because for 4 years I've only spoken out against Trump's policies, but never against the evil that is Donald Trump. I am embarrassed that I've ever felt the need to soften any of my statements when a tyrant, a racist, a sexist, a white supremacist, and a bigot takes office. I will never do that again. If I'm a spiritual leader, if I take pride in Judaism's prophetic heritage, I have to call out evil for what it is. That's what we learn from our prophets. No matter how much people don't want to hear from you, you have to speak the truth. It's not about being liked. So let me speak the truth. Trump is evil, period. And if we doubted it before, well, we have changed our minds. And you see, the biblical God understood tyrants. 1 plague wasn't going to be enough. 10 plagues were not going to be enough. You needed to drown the Pharaoh in the water just as he drowned innocent Jewish boys in the Nile. Trump thinks he stands outside the system. He does not. The treatment he has given to others should be returned to him fully. Separate him from his family. Imprison him just as he has imprisoned innocent children and immigrants. But with or without punishment, our country is broken and needs to heal. And our problems start with fake news and conspiracy theories. I've spoken about these issues in the past. I've shared with you the idea that the internet has allowed fringe ideas a toehold, a foothold, a body hold next to mainstream ideas. We need to see fringe conspiracy theories for what they are and make sure our children do the same. We have to remind everyone that it is their responsibility to read credible news sources and to do your research. Arthur Harry Frankfurt, who wrote 2 books, one called I can't pronounce it, On BS, you can figure it out, and another book on truth. He's a professor at Princeton, I believe. He wrote, societies cannot afford to tolerate anyone or anything that fosters a slovenly indifference to the distinction between true and false. Much less can they indulge the shabby, narcissistic pretense that being true to the facts is less important than being true to oneself. If there's any attitude that's inherently antithetical to a decent and orderly social life, that is it. Frankfurt's point, truth before emotion. If we allow ourselves to be swayed by what tugs at our heartstrings while ignoring all fact, we are lost. But this is not to say we need to be heartless, but our emotions should spring from a foundation of truth and decency. Moses' 40 years as a leader were not easy. There were uprisings and there were battles, but he always worked from a place of truth and holiness. This is what we should expect from our office holders. If they're unable to work from a place of truth and holiness, they should be removed from office through legal means. And if they find a way to tenuously hold on to power, then we must be a thorn in their side until what is true and holy is accomplished. Our Mishnah teaches us, pray for the welfare of the government, for it not for the fear it inspires, every man would swallow his neighbor alive. For 4 years, fringe elements led by Donald Trump have attempted to weaken our government. They've forgotten that our government branches and constitution should be feared because they will always hold our republic together. For 4 years, our democracy has been attacked. On Wednesday, the Capitol was overrun by rioters composed of white supremacists and anarchists, refusing to accept the will of the people as determined by national elections. Democracy survived this ignorant onslaught. We must continue to believe in a nation created for the freedom of all, regardless of gender, religious, and racial differences, and ruled by a democratic process. But when these ideas are attacked, we must move strongly to stop the undermining of our government. Today, so many people came to the defense of our nation, just as Moses, Aaron, Miriam, and God came to the aid of the Israelites when they were under the rule of another tyrant. So now I'd like to offer a prayer I shared with all of you via email on Wednesday afternoon. And this prayer is for those who represent us in Congress and those protecting them. May the God of our ancestors bless those who represent us in Congress. May they be given courage to continue to do the people's business. And as they do, may they be safeguarded from harm. May the God of our ancestors bless those on the front lines protecting our democracy. May they be given strength to fight ignorance as they themselves are threatened with harm. And as they defend, protect them from the risk they take to keep us safe. And together, let us say, Amen. May we all be safe, every American, as we move forward in our destiny to remain a great democracy. Shabbat Shalom. It's now my honor to ask Nicole to come back on the screen and deliver some announcements. Nicole?
I just want to thank Rabbi John, Cantor Joel, Sam Klein, and Karen Friedman, our favorite IT specialist, for that very powerful service. And now we have some announcements. For all these upcoming events, you can see the email for the different Zoom links. There's an Intro to Judaism class, which starts this Sunday. Sam Klein's adult education class is titled Ethical Dilemmas, and it's on Monday evening, January 11th at 7 p.m. Torah study will resume this Monday, January 11th. Our book club, moderated by Lisa Hanisch, is this Wednesday the 13th at 7:30 p.m. We'll be cleaning the Misha Bera list on the 11th, so please let Jessica at the office know if there's someone you would like to stay on. And join us next week for Shabbat. We'll be using the same Zoom link as tonight. Please stay after the service for our virtual oneg. Shabbat Shalom.
Our thoughts now turn to those who have passed. Those who have passed recently and those who have passed during season in years that are, well, gone. It's important to remember those who have died, to remember our heritage, to remember our connections, to remember what makes us human, the short time we spend on this earth. So I'd like to begin by mentioning the names of our recently departed. Officer Brian Sicknick, remembered by this nation. Jerry Willard, remembered by the Friedman family. Brady Rifkin, remembered by the Friedman family. Jackie Greenfield, remembered by the Fields and Meline families. Lauren Lundquist, remembered by the Lundquist and De Alessio families. And Les Morris, remembered by the Morris, Howard, and Medina families. And we also reflect on those, we remember those who died during this season in years past. Elsie Asher, Theodore Gerald Balin, Richard Batchley, Barbara Bates, Elsie Beacon, Edith Bernstein, Annette Nettie Cohen, Sig Corman, Gilbert Davidson, Jack Diamond, Karamat Fakheri, May Kishner Fine, Samuel Fischler, Debbie Friedman, Harry Groner, Reuben Holzkenner, Harry Kotnick, Silva Leeson, Harry Leitner, Sylvia Levy, Jeanette Mann, Robert Rockoff, Howard Schwartzer, Ann Silver, Jay Slack, Aaron Stanecki, and Evelyn Weingross Wiley. And I see we have some additional names in the chat window. Debbie Friedman, Joshua Rosenzweig, Ed Jotkowitz, Jim Schwartzberg, Andy Segeli, and I apologize for the mispronunciation, and Tommy Lasorda. I'm now going to add to the chat window a transliteration of the Mourner's Kaddish. If you're in the first 7 days of morning Shiva, I'm going to ask you to please rise. If you're in the first 30 days of mourning, Shloshim, I'm going to ask you to please rise. If you're observing a yort site, I'm going to ask you to please rise. I'd like to add the name of Tom Labong. If you're observing a yort site, I'm going to ask you to please rise. And now I'd like us all to rise as a community to show our love and our support to those who mourn and to those who remember. The Mourner's Kaddish is in your chat window. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah, b'alma divrach yirtei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yumechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, b'agalav yizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei amaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei d'kudsha b'richu, le'elah min kol birchata v'shirata, jushbachata v'nechamata, Damiran Bialma Vimru. Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shmaya. V'chayim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Vimru. Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimramav. Huya Aseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel Vimru. Amen. May the one who makes peace on high grant peace to all who mourn, to all Israel, and to all humankind. And together we say, Amen. Everyone can have a seat, and we're going to have Joel lead us in our closing Oseh Shalom. Joel?
Oseh Shalom bimroma, hu yaseh Shalom aleinu. Oseh Shalom bimroma, hu yaseh Shalom aleinu. Oseh Shalom bimroma, hu yaseh Shalom aleinu. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Oseh Shalom bimroma, hu yaseh Shalom aleinu. Oseh Shalom bimroma, hu yaseh Shalom aleinu. Oseh Shalom bimroma, hu yaseh Shalom aleinu. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
And now let's all pick up our Kiddush cups. I think we'll do a short Kiddush tonight, followed by Hamotzi. Joel, if you can just do them back to back, that would be great.
Sure.
And I can't unwrap my challah until after we do the Kiddush.
I apologize. I've got water here, but we'll pretend it's wine. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz b'te'avon.
I want to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. I want to thank everyone for their kind messages when me and Lisa and Lila were going through our illness over the last 2 weeks. We really appreciate all the outreach and all the kind words. Thank you. This is a wonderful community, truly wonderful. So I'm going to unmute everybody, I hope. And then you can all speak to one another. You can now unmute yourselves, I believe.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Good to see you, Rabbi. Glad you're back.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Let's hope it's a week of peace and healing.
Baruch Hashem.
Rabbi, you're so good. I hope you're well and strong.
Good.
Yes.
All of eyes, right?
Better believe.
Shalom.
Yep.